Hello, friends, and welcome back to another episode of the Liberty Weekly podcast. This one is episode 106, and I am joined by the co-host of the show, Keith Knight. How's it going, buddy?
It's going fine, Pat. Thanks.
Excellent. Okay, so this will be, the show notes for this will be at libertyweekly.net/106, and we're just going to have kind of a casual conversation about how where we're at now with our liberty journeys and kind of looking towards the past. But I'm going to start it off with one question to you, Keith, and that is, what do you think is the biggest problem facing the libertarian community right now?
I think it's the ability to let people know that what we're talking about is very important. It's hard to stress the importance of something, or it's hard for people to grasp the importance when we sell it to them as we have a philosophy, as opposed to something they can do right now, something in the media everyone's talking about, and then persuading them that there is value in having principles and thinking consistently and actually having a philosophy. You can look at how the left says they approach abortion from a totally ANCAP point of view. My body, my choice. They don't say, well, the current law is, or society has decided, or according to the Supreme Court, it's my body, my choice, unapologetic. Ocasio-Cortez, when asked by Anderson Cooper, this is going to be expensive, that can't be paid for, we're already in debt. And she goes, stop talking to me about money. I care about morality. Now, obviously, it's hilarious coming from a socialist who advocates initiating violence against peaceful people and caging them for victimless crimes. But that's where we need to be, I think. So I love that Cortez is getting people to talk more about morality, because once we're on that playing field, the game is ours. But we're not even there yet. We're still on, Trump Russia. We're still on, war on cops or something like that. So that, I think, is the general problem we face today.
Do you think that it's kind of like a marketing problem?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's definitely hard to sell people on things, especially when they have these. We got to come up with a name for something that someone just says one thing, and now they never have to address any of your arguments again, where they're like, libertarianism is a fringe ideology, or there's so many white males in there. I hear that so often, and I'm like, all right, now explain the philosophy. I imagine saying, yeah, Democrats, 95% of blacks are Democrats. Like, now you hear that it's racist, right? Well, it's also sexist to say something like, oh, it's a bunch of, white men thinking, or Bernie Sanders, that's a Koch brothers idea. Okay, not an argument, Bernie. You've been there for quite a while. You should have some principles by now. But he doesn't. And the reason is because it's hard to market to people who have joined the cult of statism, don't even know they're in a cult, and were educated by it for 12 years. And the media constantly propagates statism under the guise of it's already an assumption. They don't even say, well, let's talk about the philosophy of government. They go, government's legitimate. There should be two parties. They both represent totally different ideas. Now let's talk about one aspect of the idea they advocate. That's not even where we should be. I mean, it's the equivalent of me saying, all right, so Scientology's legitimate. L. Ron Hubbard is a primary source. Now let's talk about which aspects of his book should be violently imposed on people. No. I'm not going to assume that. So, yeah, it's definitely a marketing problem.
How do you think that people outside of libertarianism, how do you think that they view us? And I guess I shouldn't mince terms, because there are lots, I guess from the inside, we know that libertarianism is very nuanced, and there's a lot of different factions, and there's a lot of different groups that are sometimes at very constant odds against each other. But maybe, can people even tell the difference between a voluntarist and maybe a Cato Institute libertarian?
No, certainly not. That is a little too inside baseball for most people, whether the Mises Cato sort of thing, or the Rothbardians versus the Gary Johnson utilitarians sort of thing, or the minarchists versus ANCAP, or the syndicalists versus ANCAP. So, no, I think we are generally seen, from the response that I get from people, from the articles I read on anti-libertarianism. I have a whole collection of them on my computer. I think it's generally seen as a group of people who have a utopian vision and attempt to uplift themselves by claiming, I'm so much better than what's going on. I'm going to develop an unrealistic philosophy that doesn't apply to anything that's happening in the real world, so I can feel good about myself, and so I don't have to contribute, so I don't have to be a part of society. So they can just say, wah, I don't want to pay taxes, wah, I don't want to follow laws. I think that is how we are seen. But then again, that of course is how you'd expect to be portrayed by, people who cage people for victimless crimes and commit mass murder. It's like, they do have propaganda wings. They are a religion that seeks to discredit people who question their authority, whether it's ancient priests or, current politicians. And you know this because you can see how they respond to some of the criticisms we have, which are fundamental. It's not like, what were the effects of the Laffer curve on the Reagan tax cuts? It's like, does government have any rights no other organization has? When they respond to that with, you're funded by the Koch brothers, that's when you know you're not dealing with rational people. So, yeah, that is the main challenge, unfortunately.
Yeah, when I think you really hit it on the head too, is that people, I guess the thing that I've gotten recently is that people think that we are self-righteous and we think that we have all the answers or anything, and that it kind of perplexes me because they really don't understand that part of the whole point is that no one knows the right answer.
Oh, of course. Yeah. They're claiming society should be centrally planned or advocating freedom. And, we're the people who are sort of, extreme or hard to deal with. I'm thinking a person I know, won't even name them because I'm about to flip them, I think. They haven't flipped in 10 years, but I'm going to do it. I'll be damned. They said to me, it's so easy to be a libertarian. And I go, ooh, this is going to be so good. I can't wait. He goes, because everything is already done. You already have the great institution society built. You already have the roads and the infrastructure and the healthcare. And you just sit back and go, wah, I don't like this. Wah, I don't like that. And I thought that was just incredible. And I just applied it to everything else. I go, okay, let's just talk about America, because I know you know that. You could say the same thing about the founders regarding the British Empire. Everything's already done. Now you want to revolt? We came here. They were just Indians and nothing. We built this place up and now you want to revolt? You could say it about Rosa Parks. Everything's already done, Rosa. Wah, the back seat's bad. Wah, I want the front. I'm a child. Of course, see, you can make any cartoonish version of something like this. So that really gave me some insight into how someone would much rather try to psychologize a person rather than grasp the idea. Another time, you and I have both been on the Defenders of Liberty podcast with my buddy Chalon Hudson. And Chalon and I were talking to a guy who was advocating, protectionism. And I asked him, I just go, you know what? Instead, I don't even want to argue about this for a long time. Just when does this group, the government group, have a right to forcibly stop me and someone else from trading? And he goes, China is taking advantage of it. No. When do they have a right? And bro, I asked him probably 10 or 15 times, to the point where Chalon texted me and said, please stop. You've already won. This is, ridiculous. You're going to get me in trouble, because there were like 10 of us there. And it was just incredible to say the same thing again and again and again and not get an answer, and get someone just saying just anything to defend their irrational belief. Because, I think Lou Rockwell said it in Left, Right, in the State. He goes, there's really no way to kindly tell someone you've been fooled your entire life.
People get really defensive and irrational in that, to that point. But, well, how long have you been a voluntarist, Keith?
I've been a voluntarist since I was 19, so probably 3 years. But that included a 3-year deep dive because I went to college for a couple years and did no college work at all. I just basically read and watched videos and went to conferences. So in that time, I was kicked out of Grand Canyon University, Arizona State University, and Chandler Gilbert Community College. So if you're ever feeling down and out, I was kicked out of community college, and I didn't go get the rope and stool. So it's all right.
Well, it's obviously not because you're not a bright guy. You just have better things to do, right? I mean, you were learning a real education.
I can't. I'm so dumb. I can't even understand why Hiroshima is totally bad and why government should monopolize guns because there was a tragedy at Sandy Hook. That's how dumb I am.
Well, in that time that you've been a voluntarist, though, do you think that the liberty movement has improved?
Yeah, I do. And I go by the number of attendees. Well, a number of things, but the number of attendees at Anarcho-Poco has gone from like 30 guys to now it's at 3,000. We're getting many more people who grasp the philosophy, not just the talking points. Those are two very different things, mainly because of people like Michael Malice and Dave Smith, who are people who have gotten on mainstream media and said, I'm an anarchist, and that's gotten people to mentally legitimize the existence of, there's one, that's a crazy guy. Oh, there's two, maybe there's something to this. You'll learn about this psychology if you ever take the Candles in the Dark seminar by Larkin Rose. Simply hearing something again from another person who is on a television with a media behind them, so it looks much more legitimate, that sort of thing will make you much more likely to accept the existence of an idea, even though it doesn't necessarily increase the idea's validity. I'm also more positive because we have a lot more people making videos online. You have people like James Corbett getting 300,000 views on a video titled Debunking a Century of War Lies, where in 24 minutes he refutes every single excuse for the last 100 years of U.S. intervention. And so much of statism is based on the mythology, just as any, general cult will be. Jim Jones can heal people just by walking up to them and touching them is equally as ridiculous as believing in the Lincoln myth, the Wilson myth, the Roosevelt myth, the Lyndon Johnson myth, the Iraq War babies in incubators. There's just as much evidence for all of those. So because the playing field is more leveled, because Trump won, also really helped us. It delegitimized the media to such a degree that people look elsewhere. And when they're looking elsewhere, the playing field is more leveled for us because we're also on things like YouTube and Twitter and all that other stuff. I think more people have heard the word anarcho-capitalism before. Yeah. So the more rebuttal to anarcho-capitalism videos I see, the better I think we're doing, especially when they have terrible arguments. I think Mouse Productions made an 8-minute video on anarcho-capitalism, and it's 8 minutes of straw men. There's another guy who identifies as a communist, but I was sent these videos by a friend. And in all 4 videos I watch, none of them give a definition. They don't give a single definition of anarchism. I'm sorry, one of them does define anarchism, but it's a weak definition. It's no hierarchy. So parents are bad. So coming into my house is bad. You have to give a specific definition. And they don't define capitalism. The fact that they don't define capitalism shows me that they are terrified to get a define to define it, because once they do that, then it's hard to say capitalism is business and banks and guy with a mustache and child labor. You can just throw those things on. So that's why they don't define it. When I see how terrified our enemies are, I go, oh yes, there's no good arguments philosophically against us. And I think we got to be ready. So I made a video, The Case for Anarchism, The Case for Capitalism, 2 separate videos. And you can actually get a consistent definition of capitalism as a social system based on the explicit recognition of private property and non-aggressive contracts between private property owners. Nothing to do with money or business or bosses or wages or employees. Total just private property based on voluntary exchange and original appropriation and voluntary contract.
Yeah, when you were talking about the definition of anarchism as being no hierarchies, I had to try and throw in a gotcha Jordan Peterson lobster argument. I mean, so if anyone's not familiar with the Jordan Peterson lobster argument, it's that you can't get that hierarchies are so inherent to humanity and the animal kingdom in general that you can go back millions and millions of years and witness lobsters in hierarchies just based off of their biological conditioning. Just their inherent the chemicals in their brain as to why we are in hierarchies. So hierarchies is a very natural thing. There's nothing racist or sexist or anything about it. It's not unnatural.
Well, you have voluntary hierarchies. For example, all right, there's 300 of us and we need the plane to fly. Is it okay if only one person, only one, no one else even comes close to flying the plane? Is that a hierarchy? But see, again, they keep it nice and vague so they could just randomly engage in critical theory at any point. Okay, I have a book right here called 63 Documents the Government Doesn't Want You to Read by Jesse Ventura. Is it in a hierarchy and an inequality that he has sold 100,000 of those books and I've sold 0 books? Is he more of an authority? Is he of a higher worth? Is that a hierarchy? If I delegate my money spending to an accountant, does that make him an authority if I choose to have a boss? See, if you say me and Patrick can't make an exchange where he's my boss and I'm his employee, then you are the one who is claiming to be the hierarchy, illegitimate authority you claim to be against. And this is why you can get Noam Chomsky on video saying how important the Federal Reserve is. He literally says that. And you can find that in a video called Noam Chomsky, Academic Gatekeeper by James Corbett. Both of us have done shows with James Corbett. But see, when you don't have any principles, you just have mind control talking points and then costs and benefits regarding these certain things. So, yeah, definitely a big shortcoming in the anarcho-communist ideas.
Do you think that there is a point in time where someone's mind, to lend to a matrix analogy, where someone's mind cannot be freed, where they are so hopelessly entangled and dependent upon the fake system that they are impossible to, well, it's impossible for them to actually think about these other ideas and to challenge themselves with it?
Absolutely. I think there are people who are so dedicated, who they basically in their mind just say, I value current belief, current lifestyle, current group of friends more than I do philosophical consistency, advocating the truth, etc. Or even knowing reality. I mean, there are people who I will say, you know, according to Donald Rumsfeld, National Security Presidential Directive, I'm getting an echo. Did that just start on your end? Much better. Okay. So according to Donald Rumsfeld, the invasion of Afghanistan was planned on September 4th, 2001. To get people to grasp that the invasion of Afghanistan had nothing to do with 9/11, as is correct, it's so incredible that people will hear the Secretary of Defense and say, that doesn't count. And I go, okay, how about this article citing a primary source? Bush rejects Taliban offer to hand over bin Laden if the bombing stops and if they prove he was behind 9/11. By the way, my source for that is The Guardian. And my second source is Decision Points, the book George Bush wrote. He said, yeah, that would put him in a better negotiating position. And people still don't, they still won't question it. They'll still say, there were no plans to invade. We just did it because we didn't see 9/11 coming and all this other garbage. So yeah, you can really get there. Not so much with those historical references, but much more so with, do principles apply differently to different groups for different reasons. Does the Congress group, the police group, and the military group have a different set of morality than me and my friends if we put on camouflage and call ourselves Army or military or Navy? So yeah, there are definitely people who will just say, you know what, I'll lose my friends. I'll have to admit that the last 40,000 Facebook posts I put up were wrong and that I've been fooled for 50 years. Yeah, you know what? No, I'm going to support Bernie. I'm going to support AOC or even Trump for that matter. So yeah, there's definitely people who will love the blue pill so much they'll never give it up.
So what do you think is the best way then to advocate for libertarianism?
I think the best way is to engage in Socratic questioning that attempts to get people to hold the state to the same principles they would any other person or group. So many of these could be found in the work done by Larkin Rose, Candles in the Dark, where he simply asks people, you know, do you can someone delegate a right they don't have? So if government gets their power from the people and the people don't have the right to issue taxes or engage in wars or regulate each other, where did government get that right? Or what can government do that the Catholic Church can't do? Like, what if you got to vote for Pope every 4 years? Would the Pope then be allowed to tax you, regulate you, cage you for victimless crimes, nuke civilians, kill a bunch of people living peacefully in Texas? And then Janet Reno comes out and says, yeah, I take full responsibility, and then doesn't go to jail. Or just pointing out contradictions like, so we got Hillary Clinton saying it's bad for Russia to interfere in politics in America. Let's see. Would you then not support Hillary Clinton if I found evidence of her interfering in the politics of another country, Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, etc.? Those are interesting gateways to get people to not see politicians as gods who have the divine right to rule, but they don't last because someone will say, all right, you got me on Hillary, but Bernie, he's the guy. No. So that's why you got to attack him on principle. To really make a lasting impression. That's my take on it.
All right, so this is the first episode that we've done in a while that's being live streamed actually on YouTube, and this will release in, I don't know, maybe a week or so. But we have some people in the chat. This is the most active chat that I've ever had, Keith, before. So I've been asking questions and kind of monitoring it. So I'm going to ask them for any questions, and then we'll wait to see if anyone submits any questions. But you got anything you wanted to hit on?
No, I just wanted to mention the reason Pat is mainly asking me questions is we have a video coming out soon where I ask him questions about being a lawyer. So yeah, this is just a little back and forth we're doing. So make sure to check that out coming soon. Other than that, I think it's been pretty interesting with this abortion thing. Where do you stand on the AQ, the abortion question?
Oh yeah, we're going to go into this too, and then we got a good question about Stefan Molyneux that I want to hit on too from Anti-Rack. So we'll get into that later. So I personally am pro-life, although I do support Walter Block's evictionism, and my hopes are in the future that evictionism, that technology will advance to the point where evictionism is viable from conception, hopefully. Although would I use the violence of the state to prevent a woman from having a first or second trimester abortion? I really don't know. And I think the answer lies in the free market and technology.
Yeah. I would definitely agree because it's like you have third trimester where, yes, I would use me, a random organization, or a group of people called the state. In the same way, I would say, hello, officer, this person's being raped. Please stop them. Yes. When that's the current society. A smaller violation of the NAP is an officer stopping a bank robbery, even though, yes, he's funded by the state and everything else. So you definitely have to weigh the costs and benefits and the real world consequences of those sorts of things. And also, if we just say, no government and we're not going to have any opinions on things until there's no state, we're never going to be part of the conversation. So I would agree wholeheartedly. I definitely feel that about the third trimester. Second, probably. I mean, I'm trying to think of the number of weeks, because I did see a baby that was 22 weeks, that was born after 22 weeks. And you're looking at it and you're like, okay, that's a baby. What did it look like at 21 or 15 or 14? The difficult part is when you go from, it's arbitrary if you go from conception till the person, dies. That is, anything from there on is arbitrary. Whereas there is a principal difference between there just being sperm and there just being an egg, and then the two coming together. So, yeah, I would definitely say I agree with you on third trimester, and first and second, it's like, I don't know what to do.
It's tough, yeah. And well, the argument that I hate the most is you're a man, so you're not allowed to have an opinion.
Oh, I love that argument, because I then apply it to that mostly leftists. I go, oh, so you're not a 1%er, so you can have an opinion on the 1%. You're not a business owner, or you don't have employees, so you can have an opinion on the minimum wage. That one is just incredible. You're not a soldier. You can't have an opinion on foreign policy.
Exactly.
You're not a baby, so you can't have an opinion on abortion. Well, you are mentally a fucking baby. So I guess that counts. Scott Adams had a great bit the other day where he goes, we need to let infants vote. He goes, because if you say Trump mocks disabled reporter and you believe that fake news story, which I refute in a video titled Everything I Learned from Hoaxed, which can be found on my channel. I go over the Hoaxed movie, which is terrific. I go over this in particular. He goes, if you believe that's what happened, you have the IQ of an infant. So why not let infants vote? And really, if infants voted in, say, the 2004 election, you would have gotten a Skull and Bones member. You would have gotten someone who advocated taxation and regulation and the Afghan war and the Iraq war. Let's just let them vote and see how different things are, to show you that government is inherently bad. So, God, he is so great to listen to sometimes. Granted, he's wrong as fuck other times, but his thinking is just terrific.
So I was going to say that, Dave Smith has been talking a lot about abortion recently because he had this kid. And I love Dave Smith so much, but I am so turned off when he talks about his baby all the time. A lot of people have been giving him crap for this in the Facebook group too.
Well, really?
Yeah. Like, I don't like it when he talks about his baby. He goes on for like 20 minutes at the beginning of every episode. And I'm sure he'd be, if I gave him crap about it, if we talked, it's nothing personal, Dave, whatever. I just like to give you crap. But let's address some questions from the chat that we're getting here. So there was a question about, let's see. What do you think of Stefan Molyneux talking about, quote, good collectivism?
I think there are great forms of collectivism, but that's why the philosophy of libertarianism is so important. A voluntary collective is much, there are definitely many costs. There are also many benefits. That's for to decide on each, individual basis. But coercive collectivism is obviously what I'm against. As far as what voluntary collectivism is, you could say that you are in a collective called lawyers, where it's something you chose to be, and other people there have had similar experiences. And then there are accident of birth collectivism, male, American, white, those sorts of things. Whereas, yes, you could have similar experiences, but to collectivize someone based on an accident of birth is much worse and much less legitimate than generalizing them based on a direction they've chosen to take in their life. Voluntary collectivism, I think has a lot of benefits. I think there's definitely strength in numbers you otherwise could not get individually. I think there's a sense of camaraderie. There's a great opportunity for division of labor to exist in voluntary collective things. And, you know, say you're a pro-white advocate collectivist, I don't see anything wrong with that. If that's how, you know, if you value the achievements of whites or have white pride or feel like masculinity is under attack or something like that, I think those sorts of collectives can definitely be beneficial. What do you say on that one?
I don't know. Do you identify as being an individualist? Is that part of your core identity?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. But then again, that is an individualist sort of legal standpoint, whereas, you know, I would say I'm collectively a libertarian. So when someone, you know, insults a fellow libertarian or ANCAP or even an American, I do appreciate a lot of ideas and things that have come out of America. And, you know, when the national anthem comes on or something, I think it is good to just sing and be blindly connected to other people, considering it's, you know, me versus the world and every time politics is brought up. So, yeah, I consider myself a legal individualist, but a person open to collectivism when it's morally justified to do so.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with anything that you said either. I do value the individual over the collective, but I have no problems with you know, civil society, the institutions of civil society that do exist, and that is how civilization actually operates at the end of the day, whether it's, you know, organizations like Kiwanis or Rotary or all these other smaller institutions, you know, churches or anything like that. Obviously, you know, there are things you could quibble with those institutions too, but at least they're voluntary. And if, you know, as much as they don't try and affect the state, because everything is intertwined with the state the way it is now, but those institutions of civil society and things like getting to know your neighbors and, you know, all the good charity work that is done under those names, and it's completely voluntary, all those fundraisers and whatnot. And if you live in a community like mine, you really, and being a business person too, and with my law firm, we're very involved in the community, and you realize just how important that is to everyone and also your business. It's a really big part of that too.
Yeah, so when Molyneux referenced it, he was talking about a collectivism in Poland. And I could see how there would be a collective, well, if they're, you know, collective based on, hey, look at us, we all came out of our mothers in this geographical area. Isn't that fun? It's like, well, that's nothing big. But if it's, hey, in 1989, we took the president and killed him after kidnapping him because he was a communist. That is something totally different. I think his name was Nikolai Ceausescu. Was that in Poland? I'm totally spacing on who that was and where. But yeah, the Soviet Union got Poland as a gift for helping Britain in the Second World War, because Britain entered the war to save Poland from Hitler. So they gave it to Stalin. Um, uh, yeah, that sort of collectivism I could definitely see people, you know, coming together on. If you've experienced something terrible, even, you know, when you've experienced school with someone, it's not exactly like you're a POW. Sometimes it's pretty close, but you're not a POW, but you have something in common where you can have shared values, shared experiences, and appreciate things in life you otherwise couldn't do on your own. So, yeah, but that's why the non-aggression principle is so important, because when people say collectivism's bad, so you're against football, but you're for solitaire. In other words, football is done with groups and solitaire is done by yourself. But if you think about it, solitaire is not even done by yourself. Someone else created the game. Someone else created the computer. Someone else is giving you electricity. You're in the house built by someone else that you traded for. So there's an example of voluntary collectivism, people coming together to meet their ends, is totally justified. So those are my thoughts on voluntary collectivism. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about we had an episode very early on when Jerry was a co-host when we first started the show. It was one of our more popular episodes from the beginning, was getting to Ancapistan. What does that look like? How do we do that? What are your thoughts on that?
I would just refer back to my earlier answer of speaking to people on a principle that is, frankly, if I can sound overly confident, the libertarian philosophy is irrefutable. You can look at whether it's Hans Hoppe's argumentation ethics. Many people have arrived at this ethic from independent areas. Mises, Hoppe, Molyneux. I would even argue Nozick and John Stuart Mill have indirectly, and even Locke have come to this conclusion, or even they haven't come to the conclusion, but they've really they've really set us up to come there, whether it's Lysander Spooner or Frederick Douglass. Yeah, I think it just arrives simply by recognizing the illegitimacy of it is what takes its power away from the people. It's not like, all right, there's a White House and we have to take that down because that's a symbol, and there can't be a president. It's like, no, I want a society where if I went out and said, I declare myself king, if I went outside and did that now and made videos about how I'm king, people would just laugh and be like, oh, poor psycho, because no one recognizes my authority to violently rule over others. They recognize my authority to trade voluntarily and delegate contracts and whatnot. So once the president and the Congress and the military and the police are held to the same standards in Western culture as we hold everyone else to, as far as Islam goes, that's a something I need to focus more on and learn more about. But as far as the West goes, it's just applying principles consistently. I have no clue how to get there. I mean, how many people would have predicted the Berlin Wall would come down? There's one historian who I found in a book by James Perloff called Truth is a Lonely Warrior, who he found one person who predicted the wall would come down. Whereas you had economists like Paul Samuelson, Paul Krugman's hero, according to Krugman, who wrote his eulogy. In like 1985, he goes, Soviet Union is about a decade to two away from surpassing American wealth. I mean, it's so hard to tell the future. So,
Right.
yeah, so I don't know.
Well, I mean, do you advocate secession as a solution, or do you foresee some kind of like straw that breaks the camel's back and then all of a sudden there's this deluge of peace and happiness, yada, yada, yada?
I don't see a single straw that breaks the camel's back, although I'd like there to be. I'd like it to just be like, you know, one night on CNN, Don Lemon has run out of arguments against Trump that are trivial and just goes, why can the president do it if none of us can? And everyone going, oh, let's apply that to taxation and regulation and the war on drugs and and the police. I would love for that to happen. I really have no clue, and would rather, you know, just say I have no clue than say something that I don't have any big reason to believe. As far as secession, yeah, absolutely. Simply because I believe 50 competitors are superior to one monopoly being the Fed, 50 competitors being the 50 states. That doesn't mean every state will be libertarian, but simply, and by the way, can't we throw that in their face? Like, you're terrified of there being a monopoly in industry, whatever, but you support a government freaking monopoly rather than 50 competitors? Really? AOC? Really? Miss Warren? Oh, someone just bought $100 million yacht. This is terrible. It's like, okay, if you had gotten that $100 million, it would have funded the federal government for less than 1 hour. And that would not have done anything to alleviate poverty. At least buying the yacht gives someone a job. It creates wealth. I mean, something. So, yeah, that is what I would say about secession, is simply in principle, it's superior. Because anything you could say, well, what if a state legalizes slavery? What if the government drafts 1 million men into war based on a lie? We don't have to guess what would happen. It already has. And Israel, our closest ally and confidant, practices slavery to this day under the guise of public service. Barack Obama advocated for Emmanuel Macron to be the president of France, who then advocated slavery under the guise of mandatory public service, while Rahm Emanuel on C-SPAN advocated for mandatory public service. So anything you say a state can do that could be bad, the feds can also do and have done. And you just have to recognize 50 competitors are superior to one monopoly. So yeah, I would absolutely support secession.
Yeah, but is it like an end of itself? I mean, so in terms of, is it something that we should actively be expending our energy on making happen?
Maybe, because secession in and of itself is and is not a principle, in the sense of this ruling class that's small is not necessarily better than a bigger ruling class. You could have what Don Boudreaux refers to as local tyrannies, sure, but it's a principle in the sense of, shouldn't countries be able to secede from a world government? How about states from countries? How about counties from states? How about towns from cities? How about neighborhoods? How about houses from neighborhoods? How about individuals from families? Once you take it down in principle, you come down to the smallest unit, the individual. So I could see it is definitely a potential for introducing competition, thus improving quality, as hard as it is to improve quality with the state. And people sort of arriving at, well, hold on, if I take this consistently, it comes down to individual rights, and you end up with libertarianism. But then again, I would have thought that, here's how bad I am at predicting the future. I would have thought the left is never going to advocate gun control now that Trump is elected, because he is a fascist, Nazi, racist. So they don't want the military he's in control of to have any guns. Nope, they still do. They won't advocate healthcare because he'll just, bring back the Tuskegee syphilis experiment. Nope, they still support it. So I'm so bad at what people will do. And the main one is, my body, my choice. The fact that they can't apply that to my wallet, my choice, my business, my choice, my health, my choice, so that makes me think secession might not go as well. But then again, it could. I really have no clue. And terrible at predicting the future.
Yeah, likewise. Well, I think we've covered enough stuff here. Just wanted to pick your brain a little bit. So let's see. You can find those show notes, and I'll be loading those up at libertyweekly.net/106. Some good stuff there. But really appreciate you all joining us. Don't forget, if you really want to help out the show, please tell a friend, share the show, share us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play. We're on all those platforms. Also, head on over to patreon.com/Liberty Weekly. You can get some bonus episodes. We do a lot of bonus content that is off the cuff, talking about things beyond the scope of libertarianism. We've also had some special guests on our Patreon bonus content that you will recognize from libertarianinstitute.org and the Libertarian Union group. So that's always fun to do as well. Amazon affiliate link at libertyweekly.net/Amazon. Do your regular shopping, and we will get a cut, which we use to upgrade the podcast either through books or equipment. But anything else you got to add at all, Keith?
Nothing else, brother. Thank you for interviewing me.
Yeah, sounds good. All right. Always fun to record with you, man. And we will be back with another episode in the near future. Peace out.